Good morning, world changers. It is day 3 of More Beautiful Than Before and How Suffering Transforms Us. We're joined by Rabbi Steve Leader, who is going to be talking to us today. We're going to be talking about survival techniques. So the first 2 days we've explored just what pain is, your own personal story, and also what the purpose and what the meaning of pain is and what we can take from suffering. But that's all very well, but what about survival? Because when pain and suffering first hits, we first have the shock of it, we're adjusting to it, and then we're having to find a way, we're having to navigate through it, and especially if it's pain that goes on for a long time. So tell us about your own experience first and how you dealt with obviously the initial shock of your accident, and then learning to live with pain, knowing that this wasn't going to be fixed overnight, and how you found your way, what tools and techniques you used to navigate through the challenges that you were experiencing.
Well, first of all, I would say that I would not give myself a very high grade for my initial response to the shock of what happened and the pain, the physical pain of what happened. I was 54 years old at the time, 59 now. And as I said in an earlier session, I had seen a lot of pain vicariously, but personally, I'd never felt anything like this degree of physical pain and impairment. I couldn't walk. My adult children had to carry me to the bathroom, and my wife had to dress me. So, I will say the added emotional pain of that this was right at the time when my father was sinking pretty deeply into Alzheimer's, and I would watch my mother dress my father like he was her grandchild, not her husband. So it was hard for me to separate. They became conflated, this sense of helplessness. And it was my first real bullet, and we all remember when we had to take our first bullet. And I don't think I held up very well. I spiraled into depression. I was taking a lot of opioids, and I was not doing anything to get better myself. I wasn't really listening to the doctors. I wasn't doing physical therapy. I was just kind of wallowing in it. So it was when that doctor who we discussed yesterday, called me and said, "Well, you're depressed." That was when I realized, wow, I need to do something here, or this is not going to end. Certainly not going to end well. And it was really an outside observer who said, something's wrong with you, and this is what that something is, and let's develop a plan. So this leads us, Suzy, into a very important area that may or may not have been in your plan to discuss, but this is the whole area of what do we do, not when we are the victim of suffering, but when we're witness to it. What do you do when you have someone in your life who because you can see it and hear it and notice it, when that person is in terrible pain? What do you do? So I was very blessed to have people in my life who recognized my pain, who didn't care that I was, the big, important, omnipotent, omniscient rabbi, and treated me like the broken, confused, middle-aged man that I was. And they reached out to help me. I'll never forget my friend Andrew.
That helped though, because if you held yourself up here as somebody that had to stay strong and couldn't collapse, were you open?
I wasn't good at it. Pain really had to bring me to my knees. I'll tell you how bad it was, and I write about this in the book. The surgery was just 10 days before what Jews call the High Holy Days, which are sort of the World Cup final match of services for Jews, to put it in your context. And I was expected to be on the pulpit, and it was just 10 days after my surgery. So a guy who had learned his lesson would have stayed home and said somehow they'll have to figure it out without me. But instead, what I did was cooked up a scheme with one of my doctors for him to shoot me up with pain meds at the synagogue a half hour before I was to walk onto the pulpit, so that I could get through the 2 services that were back to back that evening. Now looking back on it, I realize, what an insane, foolish thing to do. But at the time, it was me pretending nothing had changed, me kind of clinging to the old me. And so I have to say to your listeners, I was far from the model student of waking up to the messages that pain had come to teach me. It really took me a long time, and it took a lot of depression and opioids and steroids. And it was only because of great doctors, a loving wife, and a handful of close friends who said, you really, let's go. Let me take you to physical therapy. Let me talk to you about how to wean yourself off of these, insidious drugs. My wife, I remember it's still hard for me to talk about. I had no appetite. The only thing I wanted to eat were my wife's grilled cheese sandwiches. She makes incredible grilled cheese sandwiches. But
Sometimes that's all you need.
yes, most times. She got me to step into the pool. We have a swimming pool in our backyard. It's Los Angeles after all. And she just got me to move off the couch, which was a major accomplishment. So, I had people around me who didn't give up on me. And that helped me not give up on myself. So in terms of your question now about survival mode, look around and consider your resources. There's this saying in emergency rooms and in the military, which is, don't just do something, stand there, which is a play off the opposite phrase, which is, don't just stand there, do something. Mm-hmm. That's what we mostly think of as the appropriate action. Don't just stand there, do something. When you're in the midst of pain, you need to first assess. You need to stand there and do nothing and look around and say, where am I and who can get me out of here? And start, reaching out. I got better at accepting help as the pain increased. No great insight there. So survival first is to listen to your pain, listen to your body, listen to your emotional state, and then look around and ask yourself, who and what will help me now? And then reach out. It sounds so simple, but it's so hard to do.
Well, absolutely. And especially from somebody that is used to helping everybody else, yes, and has never had to ask for help. Yes. But you say this, yes, you said this on Monday, in Monday's broadcast, about the prisoner cannot help themselves. They have to reach out for help.
Yes. And it takes a certain level of maturity to recognize that needing help is not a sign of weakness. It's just a sign of being human like everyone else.
Well, it's actually a great strength and courage to actually admit and say, I need your help.
Yes.
The thing is that you still weren't asking for help. You were people were coming to you saying, okay, Steve, you need to do this, you need to do that. But it was only when you were absolutely brought to your knees that you eventually thought, well, there's nothing I can do.
Yes, that's a part of the process. This is where people in recovery talk about hitting bottom, that you have to hit bottom. It's part of the process before you can come back. And that relapse is part of the problem. It's part of people always say relapse is part of addiction, and it's true. I did a pretty good job of taking care of myself. And then when I felt a little better, I went right back to my insane lifestyle. And now I've moderated a little better.
You still have quite an insane lifestyle, though.
I still work very, very, very hard. But we were talking off camera before we began today about my firm and important belief, at least for me, that a little is a lot. Even small changes can be quite significant. I'll give you one small example. I used to start my days at 7:30 every day with a breakfast meeting of one kind or another. When this all happened to me and when I was slowly able to come back to work, I told my then assistant at the time, I said, listen, I have trouble sleeping now even more than I did before. And it takes me a long time to get going in the morning. no more appointments before 10 o'clock in the morning. I'm not going to come into the office until 10 o'clock in the morning. No more breakfast meetings, no more appointments, no more phone calls. I need until 10 in the morning to do my core strengthening and to, sleep as late as I can, et cetera, et cetera. So she made that change. Guess what? No one loves me any less. No one was angry. Maybe people wait a day or a day and a half longer to see me who want to see me. It cut out a lot of frenetic nonsense. I didn't have to drive during rush hour anymore to get anywhere. And that was 5 or 6 years ago now, and I've kept that. And no one says boo. No one thinks I'm a weak sloth of a rabbi because I take care of myself in the morning. So a little is a lot. That was a big thing for me to do. Little things, any man with a back problem will understand this, and all women will understand this. This sounds so small now in retrospect, but at the time it was a big deal for me. I stopped wearing uncomfortable shoes. I always dressed the part of the senior rabbi of Wilshire Boulevard Temple of Los Angeles. I always had a suit and a tie and my polished, shoes, and I wasn't comfortable. And with my back issues, having light, comfortable shoes made a real difference. So you know what? I changed, and guess what? Nobody cared. No one loved me any less. No one thought any less of me. So this, by the way, as small as it sounds, these were revelations for me.
Yeah.
That I had the capital in the bank of the body politic of my life to make these withdrawals, and it didn't hurt anyone or me. So I think one of the things I would share with your listeners today is that small changes are very profound, especially if they're the first changes you're able to make. A little is a lot. It's kind of like the chaos theory with the butterfly flapping its wings in the Amazonian jungle, and then a hurricane, is off the coast of the Atlantic in the United States. These small things can have profound effects. So make small changes. That's one of the things I could say to people. Make small changes that make your life more comfortable and better and less stressful. And they will not be small, they'll be huge.
Yeah. Well, that's what, I often say about the small changes. It's like driving a car, and literally if you're on a straight road, if you take a 2-degree turn to the left or right, that will change the course of your life. Yes.
Yeah,
and
that's good.
That's what this is all about.
Yeah,
it's just like,
that's better than what I said. I'm going to put that in my next book. I'll give you credit, though.
You can quote me 5 times and then claim it for yourself, okay?
All right. Okay.
But in terms of, it does sound like this experience allowed you to become more your authentic self, rather than the perception that you had to be to everybody.
Yes, and it allowed me, without getting into the psychotherapy of it all, which, believe me, we don't have time for, it allowed me to be my own person rather than my father's son, because I was raised by a very, very domineering workaholic father, to whom the only thing that mattered was how hard I could work. I was working in his junkyard at 5 years old, scrubbing floors and toilets at 5. So that was my life. And so this was also about vanquishing the ghost of my father, which every man and woman at some point has to do in order to grow up. Yeah. He was right about a lot of things, but he wasn't right about everything.
No. And that's a painful lesson in itself to learn, when we idolize our parents, no matter, how good, bad, or indifferent they've been, realizing that they're not right, and we have to, mature into our own person.
That's
so
right.
In terms of when you're giving advice to the people that you support now, how does your advice differ, given what you've learned now, what you've experienced? So, when you're faced with somebody that's literally in this shock of pain, or navigating through pain, what advice do you give them? Because obviously, you come from a very spiritual background. You would have relied heavily on your faith, and I would imagine that you have people, like, you ask people to rely on their faith, but you must have questioned your faith as well during this whole process.
I never did. In
Oh.
fact, I would say that one of the best results of what I went through was the way in which it enabled me to re-embrace and fall in love again with my faith, because I found so much richness within it that spoke to me in that darkness. You know, the story of Job, for example, the 23rd Psalm that we talked about. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I shall fear no evil. The way in which Jewish history is so filled with darkness followed by hope. You know, that the way in which a shadow, if you think about a shadow deeply, is proof of light. You cannot have a shadow without a light still shining, right? It's obstructed, but nevertheless.
Yeah.
You know, the national anthem of the Jewish people is Hatikva, which means the hope. So to the contrary, I didn't question my faith going through this. I embraced it more fully. It spoke to me more deeply. So I do lead people down that path because they are coming to me as a rabbi, not as a psychiatrist, which is fortunate for both of us. And I'm a better listener, much better listener. I listen more carefully and more patiently than I did before. I know that very often what people need is someone to sit with them in the darkness, not solve it, not remedy it. Sometimes there is no remedy. I am much better at talking to them about what I would call God time, that there's a realm of time for healing that is very different than the realm of time we live in when we're not in pain and not suffering. So I urge people to be patient with their pain, patient with their suffering, and to sit with it. I talk more about how to exchange catastrophic thinking with optimistic thinking. You know, one of the things when I was writing this book, I did a lot of research on pain. One of the most interesting things I learned was it was in a study that compared patients who had identical diagnoses and identical courses of treatment. One patient was a catastrophic thinker and a pessimist, the other an optimist. And in most cases, the optimistic patient, despite having the identical malady, healed faster and endured less pain in the process than the person who was a catastrophic or pessimistic thinker. So I spent a lot of time moving people, urging people to change the internal dialogue in their head, their heart, and their soul, you know, to change from I'll never be able to do that again to this will cause me to learn and do new things, from it will never be better to it waxes and it wanes, and I will have good moments along with some bad moments. To start to change that internal conversation in a more hopeful way is very, very important. And of course, encouraging people to reach out for help, professional and otherwise. And to take better care of yourself. It sounds so simple, but it really requires a shock to most of us, a real jolt to our system before we start realizing that we actually are falling apart from the moment we're born, and that we need to take care of ourselves if we want to enjoy our lives. You know, I'm 59. The day I turned 40, my left knee started to hurt.
Really?
20 years ago, I took no daily medications. Now my drawer in the bathroom looks like a pharmacy, you know? So we fall apart, which means we have to take care of ourselves. And all of this sounds so simple, it shouldn't even be a part of this conversation. On the other hand, it is the simplest things that we don't awaken to until we've suffered.
Yeah, and that comes down to self-worth and self-value. And, you know, why is it that we don't have this optimum benchmark of self-worth? Why do we have to build it up, or, you know, or do we have it and it gets depleted? I mean, what's your thoughts on that?
I don't think it's about self-worth. I think it's about a sense of invincibility, of invulnerability. I don't think it's so much about self-worth. I think that both people who have low self-esteem and high self-esteem, I think they're both shocked when they have a heart attack.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? I think it's much more about being made of finite matter, and that, and upon which nature acts. Gravity imposes its will, right? And the years impose their will on us. And this is back to our earlier point we were discussing when we were talking about finding meaning within suffering. Can you find some purposeful meaning within that reality? So I don't think it's actually so much a self-esteem issue as the shock of the day, on the day we wake up and realize we're going to die. That day is coming. Now what?
Yeah. One of the words that you kept coming up in your last answer was hope. And when we take it back to survival, that to me seems the key word that actually gets us from staying stuck in our pain and our suffering to moving through it, because we have to know that it's not always going to be like this. There is hope.
Yes, someone needs to offer hope. I remember when I was recuperating after the surgery and pretty down, a friend of mine, Andrew, who had had a similar surgery years before, called me. He said, "How are you doing?" I said, "I feel awful," et cetera, et cetera. He said, "I know, but everyone gets better. Everyone gets better."
Wow.
And that
was a confident statement.
Yes, that meant something to me. That, oh, well, I guess everyone, that definitionally includes me.
Yeah.
And by the way, this is something I employ when I am officiating at funerals, when, as frequently as the case, a mourner, a widow, a child, a parent will look at me and say, "Rabbi, I can't do this. I just can't." I look at them and say, "You can and you will. Stand up, give me your hand, and let's put one foot in front of the other until this is over." And then I say to them, in my 34 years, not one person, not one time, not one person has been unable to put one foot in front of the other and get through this terrible day.
Yeah.
And you are not going to be the first. Let's go. And so that's hope. And it's, as my attorney says, it has the added benefit of being true. It's also true, and they know it's true.
Yeah. I think the difference is that they don't want to do it, and
Correct.
they don't want to face it. So
that's right.
But it comes out in language, I can't.
Yeah, that's different than I can't. And that's why I called the first chapter of my book, which is about the first phase. The trajectory of pain goes through, the general trajectory for people who are suffering is survival, healing, and growing. So I called the first chapter of the book, in the survival section, "When you must, you can." And it's really true. And here's the important thing about that concept. When you must, you can is true, not because you are an extraordinarily strong human being, but because you are an ordinary human being. And we all have built within us, baked into our very DNA, the ability to survive these terrible things. We do, all of us.
So you've pointed out some amazing things there that we can say to people when they're struggling. But you know what? When you're in a situation when there really is nothing to say, when it does seem hopeless, and how can we? I mean, you as a rabbi, you have your position, but here as the ordinary Joe, how can we help others that are in that struggling?
3 words. Just show up. After all of my years as a rabbi, when I'm standing outside a hospital room in the hallway before I walk through the door, I don't know what I'm going to say. I just know I have to walk through that door, and something important will emerge. And I get these calls, just like your question, hey, Steve, my best friend from college has just been diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. He's got 3 to 6 months. I'm going back east to visit with him and say goodbye. What should I say? I tell him, I don't know. Here's what I do know. Show up. Just show up. Walk in the door, sit down, and it will unfold as it should. Even if that means just sitting there in the darkness and saying nothing. You know, I have lots of more tips, but the most essential point, Suzy, is just show up. Walk in the door. The rest will take care of itself. You know, now, very often when it's a hopeless situation, I sit and I listen. I show up, by the way, as myself. You know, a friend of mine whose son committed suicide said to me, one of the things that bothered him the most was that when people came to console him, they put on this kind of act that wasn't who they really are. They came with this very long face and this hushed tone, and he just wanted them to be who they always were. So show up, but show up as you. You know, if you're a joker, joke. If you're a feeder, feed them. You know, if you're a hugger, hug them. You know, if you're a fix-it person, fix something for them. Just be you. That's what they need more than anything, is you, their friend. So just be who you are. Show up. I have found for people in terminal or hopeless situations, often I take them on mental vacations away from their current circumstances. I might say something like, Suzy, tell me about your first kiss. Or you know, or what was the best vacation you ever what was the best vacation you ever had in your life? Tell me about jumping off that boat in Belize, you know. Tell me, how did your parents meet? Do you remember? Do you know the story? What happened? Right? So I'll just take people on this mental vacation away from their sorrows for an hour. And it's beautiful. It's the power of memory. Sometimes, because of my particular role, I talk about dying with people. They want to know, what's it like? Do you know? I'll say, what do you want me to be sure to say to the kids? You know, I'm myself. So be yourself, show up. Mental vacation is very helpful. And I would say it's important to know what not to say. You know, don't come up with these pat, cliche responses to people suffering. Don't say, well, God never gives you more than you can handle. Well, who are you to decide what another person can handle, right? Don't say, you know, it's all for the best. No, it's really not all for the best. This is a hopeless situation. And above all, do not say what most people say. There's 7 words you should never say to someone who's suffering, which are, let me know if you need anything. We all do it, and it's wrong. First of all, most people who say, let me know if you need anything, they don't mean it. It's fake. It's fake empathy. They're hoping that no one asks or calls. Yeah. And even if you do mean it, let's give people the benefit of the doubt. I say to you, Suzy, let me know if you need anything. And I really mean it. I am nevertheless giving you, the already overburdened, suffering person, more homework. Now you have to decide what you need so you can tell me. It's just all wrong. Never say, let me know if you need anything. Instead, ask yourself, if I were in Suzy's position, what would help? What would be helpful? And then go do it. Just do it. Don't ask. Drop a meal off at the front door. Take the kids for a play date. Go to the doctor to take notes and kind of help advise. You know, carpool, pick up the groceries, whatever it is. Just think of something and do it. Don't wait to be told. Don't wait to be asked. Don't give homework to a person who's already suffering. So those are some of the do's and don'ts that I think will help people when they're witness to the suffering of another.
And it's such great advice not to use that phrase. Oh, sorry, a distortion there. I've had it myself, and people have asked me they've asked me in an empathetic way, saying, what can I do for you? And I'm literally just like, I don't know. I don't know. Because I just can't even think. I'm just stuck in my misery,
Right.
victim
Right.
mode, my blame, my,
Right.
shame, whatever I'm in.
Right. So figure it out and do it. Don't wait to be asked or told.
Okay. Well, great advice again, Steve. We're going to leave
Yeah.
it there for today.
Okay.
And tomorrow we'll be back to talk about how we start to begin the journey of healing our pain and starting the
Very good.
transformation process. So
Okay.
thank you again. Take
I
care.
look forward to it. You're so welcome. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Take care.